Hi guys, welcome back. Now, in the last few videos you've seen me recondition the bed of the lathe. That's now done, all but one last task, and that is we need to figure out how we're going to attach this onto the bench. I'm probably going to make a wooden base for this, probably end up using something like inch thick chipboard or piece of countertop or something like that, something nice and heavy, but I'm going to bolt it into this hole here and the one on the other end through whatever that surface is. So these are 3/8 Whitworth bolts, and as I mentioned in another video, there's a few peculiarities with the Whitworth system, like the standardised size of the heads for a start off with. So yeah, it's just like slightly screwy size for which you need the correct sockets. But I'm determined to keep this original, so I'm not going to re-thread that with a metric equivalent. I suppose I could bore it out and re-tap it to a 10mm metric thread. Really don't want to do that though. Instead, I would rather see if I can fabricate some bolts. Now, these bolts are the ones that hold the pulley unit on, so I'm able to identify from that the size that we're dealing with. It's a perfect fit. I know it's Whitworth, but I can use this bolt to check that in a second. And with a caliper, let's just prove this out. So inches 0.36. Okay, so 3/8 for sure. So I need to find either some 3/8 stock, or ideally I need to find some coach bolts or something like that I can actually cut down. So what I'm going to be doing here is poking through my collection of old bits and bobs, of which I have quite a formidable collection, quite a lot of which were actually left in a house that I moved into and found a shed full of jars just like this. They're old tomato juice jars from back in the day. What have we got here? These look promising. Okay, so they're way longer than I'm going to need. Same head size, so that's a start. Are they 0.36? Yes, they are. Okay, so at the very least I can lop the tops off these and re-tap that to be the same Whitworth thread. Let's have a little look. So if I just grab two of those. Now, the fact that the head is the same size for the diameter of the thread as Whitworth, I am suspicious that these might in fact be Whitworth nuts and bolts. Yeah, they are. Oh, that fits lovely. Okay, so I'm going to keep that out. That'll come in useful when I have to cut them to size. So what I'll do basically is wind the nut down, cut the thread off above it, and then wind the nut off as a way of straightening out the threads rather than having difficulties trying to thread it in, cross-threading, damaging threads and so on. So that's a really useful thing to have. Keep that safe. So we're definitely dealing with Whitworth bolts here then. Keep those in a safe place too. I'm not a massive hoarder, but I do keep things that might generally be useful, and I'm kind of glad at moments like this. They don't come along very often, if I'm honest. I'm glad at moments like this that I can't quite bring myself to throw away jars full of nuts and bolts, this kind of stuff. You never know. I mean, as long as they're not taking up too much space and you're not overrun by them, they're not too much of an inconvenience. Now, what have we got? On the shelf above the camera here I have a bunch of sets of taps and dies, this kind of thing, and the top one is Whitworth. So these are still freely available and they're not that expensive. These I have for working on old bikes. So what we're looking at then is 3/8, so 16 threads per inch. Let's see what we've got here. They're very rusty, but they do in fact appear to be the right thread. These are pretty dirty as well. I think I'm going to start off by cleaning these up. Okay, so let's get these in a vise, make absolutely certain that we have the right tool for the job here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to stick this in the vise. I'm going to stick the die in the holder. In fact, I don't like the one that comes with this here. It's flimsy and lightweight. I'm going to grab an old school one. Alright, here we go. Old school like the old school. Modern equivalent. Flimsy as anything. Lightweight, monk metal, useless. Old version. 3 screws to the one to actually hold the die in place properly. And the difference in build quality is tangible, so I'll use the new die. Okay, so that's actually a BSF, British Standard Fine. British Standard Whitworth is the coarse equivalent. So you'll notice with these dies, one side is tapered, slightly bigger aperture, and the other side is the finished thread size. So you always fit these things with the lettering up in the die, and that is going to be the bit that goes onto the workpiece first. I'm going to tighten it in the middle. Of course, that's the only option with the new type. I'm then going to tighten it down with these 2 little screws as well. There you go. Okay, so I've got the bolt that's to be cleaned up in the vise. I'm going to put a bit of cutting oil here on the top of that, let it trickle down, and I'm going to put the die on with the tapered side, the big end if you will, with the writing on it down. That's going to allow me then to find the existing thread more easily, rather than having to worry about it cross-threading and really chewing the thing up. Okay, so it's very, very important when you're doing this to keep on putting the cutting oil onto the cutting surface, but every time you go around once, you go back a quarter of a turn. You're going to go around once, starting to feel tension, back a quarter of a turn. So what this does is it breaks the chips off. You get little spirals of swarf forming, and they can actually jam in the die and get damage the following threads. So we're going to go around once and back, round once and back. Never scrimp on this, there's really no need to. Just take your time. Now I'm cleaning up a thread here. So this is very different from cutting a fresh one, which I'm going to be doing in a few moments. That, I think, is plenty enough. Now remember, I put a truckload of oil on that right at the start, but it doesn't hurt even when you're taking it off, just to slap a bit more on. And move smoothly. Remember that the cutting is going to happen on the way down and the way up. And don't drop it when you take the thing off. Okay, so that's a nice clean thread there. Just give that a quick wipe. Test that with a known Whitworth nut there, albeit a square one. Perfect. Okay, so a couple of things done there. The first and most important is that we've proven that this is in fact Whitworth thread. So that will do just lovely when it comes to creating some bolts rather, to anchor the bed of this lathe down onto the desktop. Okay, so now I've got one of the longer bolts mounted in the vise. I'm just going to get this started on the existing thread. And what I'm planning to do is basically chase this thread all the way down so that I can then cut it off to the size that's needed later. And in order to do that, it's going to need quite a bit of oil. So I'll just keep on topping that up as we go. And because I'm cutting a fresh thread for the majority of this bolt, I'm going to be going maybe a half a turn absolute max, maybe less, before reversing direction. You have to have a little bit of sympathy with your tools. You know, don't be sticking this in a power drill and expecting it to not shatter. They are precision tools. And you have to use the right combination of appropriate amounts of force and technique, and just follow the rules. Not difficult. Now, this is something you can really only do with a vise. More oil at this point, I think. A good liberal splat. Doesn't matter if it pours all over the bench, because the bench is basically just a piece of steel. It'll benefit from it. So that's starting to look pretty nice. It's not going to be a quick job, this. But it's not just so easy to go out and buy these things, so sometimes you don't have any choice. Now, I'm going to be cutting most of this bolt off anyway. I think I'm going to pull the thread down to about here. Most of this, as I say, is going to get chopped off, but just gives me the opportunity to create a couple of blanks for an obsolete thread. I'm certainly not going to be able to go to B&Q and pick up. Okay, so again, not scrimping on the oil. I'll just bring that back down to where we were. Okay, and as before, when you're cleaning a thread, full turn quarter back. I'm going to do the same again here. Now that I'm down to the bottom again, I'm going to do maybe a third of a turn, half a turn, whatever feels right, to be honest. The material you're working on will let you know. But what's really important, as I mentioned, is that you don't suddenly jar the cutters, because they are very, very hard steel, but they're also rather brittle. They will break, and if they break, they're absolutely useless. They'll actively damage threads as you go. More oil. Now at that point I'm just going to check that all of these screws are tight and they have loosened up a touch. Just nip those up. You can hear the crunch as the chips break off. You can even see them falling down there. Every so often, just back it all the way back up. That's what I'm going to do now. Lubricating all the threads as we go, nice and smooth as you take it off, just to make sure we're not trapping any swarf or any chips in the thread. Okay, we're getting back to the bottom of the section that was cut before. So at this point I'm doing about 1/3 of a turn before breaking the chips. And really taking my time. A lot of these tools, if you have to apply too much force to it, you're probably doing it wrong. So if it feels unreasonably hard work, just take a look at what you're doing and figure out if it's technique that's letting you down. Being super careful at the top here that it doesn't drop again. And that is how you cut a thread on a bolt using a die. Admittedly I'm using an old school die holder, but the effect of the modern ones is very much the same. I just have more confidence in this steel equivalent to the monk metal version that comes with the kit, not least because it's being held in place by 3 screws rather than just that little groove in the middle and the one. Things to remember: don't force it. If you're cleaning a thread, every full turn go back 1/4. If you're cutting a fresh thread, as I just was here, you could probably get away with it with a smaller diameter, but this is 3/8 inch, so quite a significant bolt here. I was turning 1/3 and then back just a little bit, maybe 20-25 degrees each time, just to break the chips off. And if it feels too hard, if it feels like you're doing too much work, questions to ask yourself are: have you put enough oil on it? Are you trying to bite too much out of that? Is it full of chips? Do you need to back it off? And just take your time. So there you go, 2 new 3/8 Whitworth bolts, 16 threads per inch, suitable for anchoring the reconditioned lathe down onto a bench once I decide how thick that bench is going to be. And what it's going to be made of, I'll probably end up cutting them off about 2/3 of the way along, and as I mentioned before, I'll thread this nut on, cut it off, and then unthreading the nut will straighten out the ends of the thread. Should it get damaged by the angle grinder I'm going to use to lop the ends off. So there you go, that's us for today. Thanks very much for watching, take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.